The smoke still rose from the burning buildings of New Hanyang Colony when Captain Deho stepped onto the conquered soil. His scaled feet crunched on broken glass and debris. Around him, Wrath soldiers celebrated their victory with harsh clicking sounds that passed for laughter among their kind. The battle had lasted 6 months. 6 brutal months of fighting human defenders who refused to surrender even when logic said they should. Deho looked at the casualty reports on his datapad and felt his tail twitch with suppressed anger. 3,000 Wrath dead, 9,000 wounded. To take 1 human colony world. The humans had numbered barely 800 regular soldiers when the invasion began. They should have fallen in weeks. Instead, they fought like cornered animals, making the Wrath pay for every street and every building. The human commander had withdrawn 3 days ago with the survivors. Perhaps 200 humans escaped into the forests before taking shuttles to orbit. A fighting retreat that cost Deho another 400 soldiers. Even in defeat, the humans made them bleed. A junior officer approached and saluted. "Captain, High Command sends congratulations. They say the human defensive line is broken. We can push toward their homeworld now." Deho nodded slowly. The Wrath Empire and their allies in the Quinn Collective had been at war with humanity for 3 years. At first, the aliens thought it would be easy. Humans were a young species, barely 2 centuries into space travel. They controlled only 14 colony worlds. The Wrath controlled hundreds. The Quinn controlled thousands. But the humans fought differently than other species. They didn't follow the standard galactic warfare protocols. They used tactics that seemed insane. They set traps that cost them their own lives, just to kill a few more enemies. They fought in ways that made no logical sense, yet somehow worked. Deho had read the reports from other battlefields. On the colony world of Seojan's Rest, human soldiers had collapsed their own ammunition depot on top of a Quinn assault force. 50 humans died in the explosion, but so did 3,000 Quinn warriors. On the mining world of Bizen Station, human defenders had vented an entire habitat section into space while they were still inside it, just to kill the Wrath boarding party trying to capture it. The galaxy had learned to respect human regular forces. But respect was not the same as fear. The aliens still had superior numbers, superior technology, and superior firepower. Eventually, the humans would run out of soldiers. Eventually, they would lose. Deho believed this. High Command believed this. The entire Galactic Coalition believed this. They were wrong. Across the galaxy, on Earth itself, Colonel Mayong sat in a gray concrete room deep beneath the surface. The room had no windows and only one door. Screens covered the walls, showing star maps and battle reports from a dozen worlds. She studied each report carefully, her dark eyes moving from screen to screen with practiced efficiency. A man in a black uniform entered the room and saluted. "Colonel, the regular forces have completed their withdrawal from New Hanyang. All surviving personnel are accounted for." Myong nodded. "Good. What are our casualty ratios?" 3-1 in our favor, ma'am. Just as predicted. And the aliens? They believe they're winning. Their fleet movements indicate they plan to push deeper into our territory within the month. Myong allowed herself a small smile. Perfect. They've taken the bait completely. Have they identified any of our special operations units yet? No, ma'am. They still believe our regular forces are the extent of our military capability. Excellent. Myong stood and walked to the largest screen, which showed the positions of all known enemy fleets. The regular forces have done their job. They've fought hard, made the enemy commit resources, and gathered intelligence on alien tactics and technology. Now it's time for Phase 2. She pressed a button on her desk. Across Earth and a dozen hidden bases throughout human space, secure communications activated. Men and women in unmarked uniforms received coded messages. Teams began assembling. Equipment was loaded onto stealth ships. Plans that had been prepared for months moved into execution. "Send the activation order," Miong said quietly. "Operation Reaper is go." At a training facility in the mountains of what used to be called Korea, Sergeant Hyunwoo gathered his team in a briefing room. 6 people sat around a metal table, all wearing plain gray uniforms, with no rank insignia, no name tags, no unit patches. Nothing that would identify them as anything other than ordinary soldiers. But these were not ordinary soldiers. Hyunwoo looked at each team member in turn. Corporal Jiwon, a woman of 28 who could hit a target at 3 kilometers in a windstorm. Private Sano, barely 22, who could build a bomb from spare parts in 10 minutes. Corporal Yoonji, the medic who had kept wounded soldiers alive in conditions that should have killed them. Private Dong-yoon, the youngest at 20, who could hack any computer system the aliens had. Lance Corporal Nari, 26, who could move through enemy territory like smoke, and himself. Hyunwoo was 31, a veteran of operations that officially never happened. He had killed 247 enemy combatants in 3 years of war. The aliens didn't know his name. They didn't know he existed. "Listen up," Hyunwoo said, activating a holographic display above the table. An image of New Hanyang appeared, showing terrain features and enemy positions. "We're going back to New Hanyang. Deep insertion behind enemy lines. Our mission is intelligence gathering and disruption. The aliens think they control that world. We're going to show them they don't control anything." Ji-won leaned forward. "Rules of engagement? Full discretion. We're not regular forces anymore. We don't hold territory. We don't fight fair. And we don't follow their expectations of how war works. We hit them where they're weak, when they're vulnerable, and we vanish before they know what happened." Sun-ho grinned. "Finally. I was getting bored of training exercises." "This isn't a game," Hyunwoo said sharply. "The regular forces fought hard to create this opportunity. They died to make the aliens think they know how humans fight. We're about to teach them they know nothing. Every move we make will be analyzed. Every technique we use will be studied. We need to succeed not just for this mission, but for every mission that comes after." Nari spoke up, her voice quiet. "When do we deploy?" 48 hours. Get your gear ready. Review the terrain data. And get some sleep. Once we're on the ground, we might not get another chance for days." The team dispersed, each member heading to prepare in their own way. Hyunwoo stayed in the briefing room, studying the holographic map. He had trained for this his entire adult life. The regular military taught soldiers to fight as units, to follow doctrine, to win through superior coordination and firepower. Special forces taught something different. They taught soldiers to think like predators, to adapt like water, to become what the enemy feared in their nightmares. The aliens had spent 3 years learning to fight human regular forces. They had adapted their tactics, adjusted their strategies, and learned to respect human conventional warfare capabilities. They thought they understood humanity's military now. They were about to learn the difference between understanding and wisdom. The difference between regular soldiers and special forces. The difference between fear and terror. On New Hanyang, Captain Dae-ho stood on the observation deck of his command center and looked at the stars. His species had conquered 40 worlds in the last century. They had fought 7 different alien species and defeated them all. Humans were tough, yes, but they would fall eventually. It was only a matter of time. He had no idea that in 48 hours, everything he thought he knew about human warfare would be proven wrong. He had no idea that his comfortable command center would become a death trap. He had no idea that 6 humans were coming for him, and that nothing he had learned in 3 years of war would prepare him for what was about to happen. The real war was about to begin. The drop pod fell through the atmosphere of New Hanyang like a dark meteor. Inside, 6 humans sat strapped into crash seats, breathing steadily as the pod shook and rattled around them. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. They had reviewed the mission 100 times. Each person knew their role perfectly. Sergeant Hyunwoo watched the altitude display count down. 5,000 meters. 4,000. 3,000. At 1,000 meters, the pod's stealth systems activated fully, absorbing radar waves and bending light around its surface. To any Vrath sensors watching, the pod simply disappeared. The landing was soft, cushioned by systems designed to make almost no sound. The pod had come down in a forest 20 kilometers from the nearest Vrath base. The hatch opened with a quiet hiss. Hyunwoo stepped out first, weapon ready, scanning the darkness. Nothing moved. No alarm sounded. The forest was silent, except for the wind in the trees. One by one, the team emerged. They moved quickly and efficiently, distributing equipment from the pod's storage compartments. Weapons, ammunition, supplies, specialized gear. Everything they would need for the next week. When the pod was empty, Sunho activated its self-destruct sequence. In 30 minutes, the pod would dissolve into molecules that looked like natural soil. No evidence would remain. The team moved into the forest in single file, Nari in the lead. She wore specialized goggles that showed heat signatures and motion patterns. Every 50 meters she would stop, crouch, and scan the area ahead. The others waited in absolute silence. They had trained to move like ghosts. No talking. Hand signals only. Even their breathing was controlled to minimize sound. For 3 days they traveled through the wilderness. They passed Vrath patrols twice. Each time, Nari spotted the aliens long before the aliens could spot them. The team would freeze in place, using camouflage systems that bent light and absorbed heat. The Vrath would pass within 10 meters. Completely unaware, the humans watched them through the trees. On the 3rd night, they reached their objective. A Vrath forward operating base built on what used to be a human farming community. The base housed approximately 500 Vrath soldiers, 3 command officers, and enough equipment to support operations across half the continent. High walls surrounded the base. Guard towers watched the approaches. Sensors scanned constantly for intruders. The Vrath thought they were safe. They had studied human tactics for 3 years. They knew humans would need heavy weapons and explosives to assault such a base. They knew humans would need vehicles and air support. They knew any attack would be detected long before it reached the walls. They knew all of this because that was how human regular forces operated. Special forces operated differently. Hyeon Woo and his team observed the base from a hillside 2 kilometers away. Ji-won set up her rifle on a stabilized platform and began marking targets through her scope. Dong-yoon deployed a small drone, the size of an insect, that flew toward the base, transmitting data about sensor frequencies and communication patterns. Yoonji prepared medical supplies and set up a concealed position where she could provide support if anyone was injured. Sunho smiled as he assembled the devices he would need. Hyunwoo had seen that smile before. Sunho loved his work. 2 hours until their shift change, Hyunwoo whispered. That's when security is weakest. Sunho, you're up first. Dong-yoon, jam their communications on my signal. Ji-won, take targets of opportunity only. Nari, you're with me. Yoonji, stay here and monitor our vitals. The team synchronized their watches. Then they moved. Sunho approached the base alone, carrying a pack of equipment that weighed almost 30 kilograms. He moved slowly and carefully, avoiding the patrol patterns that Dong-yoon had identified. The base's sensors swept the ground constantly, but Sun Ho knew how to defeat them. He moved in the sensor-blind spots, in the shadows between their coverage areas. It took him 40 minutes to cross 500 meters. He reached the base's outer wall and pressed himself flat against it. Above him, a guard tower held 2 Wrath soldiers. They were talking to each other, bored and tired. They had been on duty for 8 hours. They wanted to sleep. They weren't paying attention to the ground below. Sun Ho placed his first charge on the wall. It was no bigger than his palm, but it contained enough nanothermite to burn through solid steel. He placed 5 more charges at key structural points, then moved toward the fuel depot. The Wrath kept their vehicle fuel in large tanks, surrounded by a concrete barrier. They thought this was safe. Sun Ho climbed over the barrier like a shadow. He placed charges on each tank, setting timers that would create a sequence of explosions. First one tank, then another, then another. Maximum chaos. Maximum confusion. Then he moved to the ammunition storage bunker. Getting inside was harder. The bunker had electronic locks and guards. But Sun Ho had something the guards didn't expect. A device that Dong Yun had built, capable of mimicking the electronic signature of a Wrath officer's access card. Sun Ho held it near the lock. The door clicked open. Inside, stacks of ammunition crates filled the bunker. Missiles, bullets, grenades, power cells. Everything an army needed. Sun Ho placed his largest charges among the crates, then retreated. It took him another 40 minutes to get back outside the base perimeter. "I'm clear," he whispered into his radio. "Copy," Hyun-woo replied. Dong Yun, prepare to jam. Ji-won, targets designated. Nari, go. While Sun Ho had been planting explosives, Nari had been doing something even more difficult. She had entered the base itself. Her suit was covered in adaptive camouflage that changed color and pattern to match her surroundings. She moved through the base like water, flowing from shadow to shadow. Twice, Wrath soldiers walked past her within arm's reach and never saw her. She reached the command center, a reinforced building at the base's heart. The door was guarded. Nari waited until the guards became distracted, then slipped past them in the 3 seconds they weren't looking. Inside, Wrath officers worked at computer terminals, coordinating operations across the region. Maps covered the walls. Classified documents sat on desks. Nari pulled out a small device and plugged it into a computer terminal. The device bypassed the alien security systems and began copying data. Troop movements, supply routes, communication codes, strategic plans, everything. A Wrath officer walked toward the terminal. Nari pressed herself into a corner, barely breathing. The officer stopped 1 meter away, looking at something on a screen. Nari could have reached out and touched him. For 30 seconds, she didn't move. Finally, the officer walked away. The device finished copying data. Nari unplugged it and moved toward the exit. She passed the guards again. They never looked in her direction. She was outside in minutes, moving back toward the team's position. "Data acquired," she whispered. "Clear of the base." "Excellent," Hyun-woo said. "All teams report status." One by one, they confirmed ready. Hyun-woo checked his watch. The shift change had begun. Tired guards were being replaced by fresh ones. For 5 minutes, the base's security was at its weakest point. Everyone was distracted. Everyone was moving around. "Execute," Hyun-woo said. Sun Ho's first charge detonated. The fuel tank exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the night sky. Wrath soldiers shouted in alarm, running toward the depot. Then the second tank exploded. Then the third. Flames shot 50 meters into the air. Dong Yun activated his jamming equipment. Every radio in the base went silent. The Wrath couldn't communicate with each other or call for help. Chaos spread as soldiers ran in all directions, unsure of what was happening or what to do. Chi-1 took her first shot. The bullet traveled 2 kilometers in less than 2 seconds. It struck a Vrath officer in the gap between his helmet and body armor, the weak point she had identified through hours of observation. The officer fell dead. 8 seconds later, she fired again. Another officer fell. Then a third. The ammunition bunker exploded. The blast was enormous, shaking the ground like an earthquake. Missiles launched randomly into the sky as they cooked off in the heat. Bullets fired in all directions. The entire base was engulfed in fire and chaos. Vrath soldiers tried to organize a response, but they couldn't communicate. They couldn't find the attackers. They couldn't understand what was happening. Some thought they were being hit by artillery. Others thought it was an airstrike. None of them considered that 6 humans with specialized equipment could cause this much destruction. Hyun Woo watched through binoculars as the base burned. He counted casualties. 40 Vrath dead, maybe 60 wounded. The base's command structure was destroyed. Their supplies were gone. It would take weeks to rebuild, and in that time, they couldn't support any offensive operations. Mission accomplished, he said quietly. Time to move. The team packed their equipment and disappeared into the forest. Behind them, the Vrath base continued to burn. By the time dawn came, the team was 30 kilometers away, hidden in a cave system that the aliens didn't know existed. In the ruins of the base. Sub-Marshal Kryn stood among the wreckage and tried to understand what had happened. His best analysts examined the damage. The explosions had been perfectly placed to cause maximum destruction. The timing had been flawless. The attackers had known exactly where the weak points were, and they had left no trace. No footprints. No shell casings. No bodies. Nothing. It was as if they had never been there at all. Kryn sent a report to High Command, explaining that they were facing a new kind of human soldier. Something different from the regular forces. Something that operated outside all known tactical frameworks. High Command dismissed his report as excuses for incompetence. They believed the base had been destroyed by saboteurs from the local human population. They didn't understand what Kryn was trying to tell them. Across 12 other worlds, similar attacks happened that same night. Vrath and Quinn bases burned. Officers died from impossible sniper shots. Supply convoys disappeared without a trace. And everywhere, the aliens found nothing. No evidence. No clues. Just destruction and death delivered by invisible hands. The whispers began. Human phantom soldiers. Ghosts who couldn't be detected or stopped. Warriors who fought by rules the galaxy had never seen before. The real war had begun. And the aliens were already losing. The Quinn Collective's invasion fleet emerged from faster than light, travel above Sayangnam Station like a swarm of metal locusts. 4 hive fleets, each containing hundreds of ships. 2 million Quinn warriors ready to deploy to the surface. The collective mind that controlled them all pulsed with confidence. Numbers would win this battle. Numbers always won. Below, on Sayangnam Station, the human defenders watched the invasion fleet arrive and knew they were badly outnumbered. The planet was an industrial world, home to 3 million civilians and only 30,000 regular military personnel. Against 2 million Quinn warriors, the math was simple and brutal. General Park, commander of Sayangnam's defense forces, stood in the command center and watched the enemy ships begin their descent. His face showed no emotion, but inside, his mind raced through calculations. He could hold the central fortress for maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 if they were lucky. But eventually, the Quinn would overwhelm them through sheer numbers, unless the plan worked. Have our special operations teams confirmed their positions? He asked. A young lieutenant checked her display. Yes, sir. 30 operators deployed and in position throughout the city ruins. Major Taijing reports his teams are ready. Good. Let them come. We'll give them the fight they expect, and then we'll show them something they don't. The Quinn landing craft hit the ground like meteors, smashing through buildings and tearing up streets. Warriors poured out by the thousands, their insect-like bodies moving with terrifying speed. They attacked in waves, coordinated by the hive mind that connected every Quinn to every other. They moved as one organism, anticipating each other's actions perfectly, supporting each other without needing to communicate. The human regular forces fought desperately from prepared positions. Machine guns cut down hundreds of Quinn, but more kept coming. Artillery shells exploded among the swarms, killing dozens with each blast, but the gaps were filled immediately. The Quinn didn't care about casualties. Individual warriors meant nothing to the hive mind. Only the collective mattered. The humans began falling back toward the fortress, exactly as General Park had planned. The Quinn pursued, sensing victory. Their warriors flooded into the city ruins, searching buildings and hunting for hidden human soldiers. The hive mind calculated that the fortress would fall within 5 days. The hive mind was about to learn it, had miscalculated badly. In the underground tunnels beneath the city, Corporal Yuna moved through darkness with 4 other operators. She wore a specialized suit that absorbed sound and masked her thermal signature. Sensors in her helmet showed the positions of Quinn warriors above, displayed as red dots on a 3-dimensional map. Thousands of red dots moving in coordinated patterns. But Yuna wasn't interested in the warriors. She was hunting something else, something the Quinn thought was hidden and safe. Target is 200 meters ahead, Private Mino whispered through the radio. He was their sensor specialist, carrying equipment that could detect the unique energy signature of a Quinn hive node. 32 warriors guarding it. Copy, Yuna replied. Weapon check. Each team member confirmed their gear. Yuna carried a short-barreled rifle designed for close combat and a blade made of molecular sharp composite material. The blade was her preferred weapon. Close and personal, they reached a junction in the tunnels. Above them, through the concrete ceiling, the hive node pulsed. It was a biological computer, a living thing that helped coordinate the warriors in this section of the city. Destroying. It wouldn't kill the warriors, but it would sever their connection to the hive mind. They would become individuals, confused and unable to coordinate. Reaching in 30 seconds, Yuna said. She pulled out a small device and attached it to the ceiling. The device began cutting through concrete with a laser that made no sound. Remember, speed is everything. We have 40 seconds from breach to extraction. Any longer and reinforcements will arrive. The device finished cutting. A section of concrete fell away, revealing the floor of a Quinn command post above. Yuna went through first, moving so fast she was a blur. Her blade flashed. A Quinn warrior's head separated from its body before it could react. The other 4 operators followed her through, weapons firing. The room erupted in violence. Quinn warriors tried to respond, but they were too slow. These humans moved with enhanced reflexes, their bodies augmented with combat drugs that increased reaction time and pain tolerance. Each operator was worth 10 normal soldiers. Yuna cut through 3 warriors in as many seconds. Her blade moved like liquid silver, finding weak points in Quinn armor with precision. Behind her, Minho fired controlled bursts that dropped warriors before they could raise their weapons. Sergeant Kangmin threw a device that exploded with an electromagnetic pulse, frying the electronics in the room. The hive node sat in the center of the room, a pulsing mass of biological tissue and technology. Yuna pulled out an incendiary charge and placed it directly on the node. Charge set. Move. The team retreated through the hole they had entered from. Above, the remaining Quinn warriors tried to follow, but Minho dropped another charge that collapsed the opening. 30 seconds later, the incendiary activated. The hive node burned at 3,000 degrees. Everything in the room was incinerated. Outside, across 6 city blocks, Quinn warriors suddenly stopped their coordinated advance. They looked around in confusion. The voice in their heads, the connection to the collective, was gone. They were alone for the first time in their lives. They began firing at each other, unable to distinguish friend from foe without the hive mind's guidance. Node destroyed, Yuna reported, moving to extraction point. Confirmed, Major Taijin responded from his command position. All teams report status. Across the city, 11 other special operations teams reported similar success. 12 hive nodes destroyed in the last 6 hours. 12 sections of the Quinn invasion force reduced to chaos. The collective mind tried to compensate, rerouting connections and re-establishing control, but it took time. Time the humans were going to use Dot in the fortress. General Park watched his displays as the Quinn invasion fell apart. Entire sectors of enemies had stopped advancing and started fighting among themselves. The organized swarm had become a disorganized mob. All forces, counterattack, he ordered. Hit them while they're blind. Human regular forces poured out of the fortress, catching the confused Quinn warriors completely by surprise. Artillery that had been held in reserve opened fire, targeting the densest concentrations of enemies. Tanks rolled forward, crushing disorganized Quinn, who couldn't coordinate a response. Aircraft strafed the landing zones, where more warriors were still deploying. Unable to receive proper coordination from the hive mind, the battle turned into a massacre. The Quinn Collective had never experienced anything like this. They had fought dozens of wars against dozens of species. Their hive mind coordination was their greatest strength, the tactical advantage that made them nearly unstoppable. But humanity's special forces had identified the weak point in that system and exploited it perfectly. By nightfall, the invasion had collapsed. Of 2 million Quinn warriors who had landed on Sawanam Station, less than half remained alive. The survivors retreated to their ships in complete disorder, abandoning equipment and wounded. The hive fleets withdrew to orbit, broadcasting distress signals that echoed across the galaxy. In the Vrath Empire's capital, Emperor Thrawn received reports of the disaster with growing concern. He had been monitoring humanity's military capabilities carefully for 3 years. The regular forces were tough and clever, but ultimately predictable. This was something different. This was surgical, targeted, and devastatingly effective. He called an emergency session with his military advisors. Explain to me how 30 human soldiers destroyed an invasion force of 2 million. The advisors looked at each other nervously. Finally, one spoke. Imperial Majesty, we believe the humans have been concealing their true military capabilities. The regular forces we've been fighting appear to be only part of their strength. These new soldiers operate differently. They don't follow standard warfare protocols. They target vulnerabilities we didn't know we had. What are you saying? I'm saying that we've been fighting humans on easy mode, and they just switched to hard mode. Emperor Thrawn was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke carefully. Find out everything you can about these new human soldiers. I want to know who they are, how they train, what makes them different, and I want to know if we can defend against them. The advisor hesitated. Imperial Majesty, I'm not sure we can. They seem to be able to go anywhere and do anything. Our bases aren't safe. Our supply lines aren't safe. Even our homeworlds might not be safe. That's unacceptable. Yes, Imperial Majesty. But it may also be true. On Earth, Colonel Myung read the battle reports from Saongnam Station with satisfaction. The operation had succeeded beyond even her optimistic projections. Casualties were minimal, with only 2 operators wounded and none killed. The Quinn invasion had been stopped cold, and the psychological impact on the enemy would be enormous. But this was only the beginning. The Special Forces had proven they could defend human worlds. Now came the harder part. Now came the offensive operations. She activated her communications array and began sending orders to Special Forces units across human space. New missions, deeper penetrations into enemy territory, strikes against targets the aliens thought were untouchable. The next phase of the war would be fought not on human worlds, but on alien worlds, in alien cities. In the heart of their territory, the Galactic Coalition had wanted war with humanity. They had studied human regular forces and learned their tactics. They had adapted their strategies and felt confident they understood human military doctrine. They were about to learn that understanding human soldiers and understanding humanity's full military capability were two completely different things. The regular forces had been holding the line, buying time, letting the enemy think they were winning. The Special Forces were about to show them what losing really meant. Major Taijin stood on the roof of Seongnam's fortress and watched the sun rise over the battlefield. Bodies of Quinn warriors covered the ground as far as he could see. Burning ships dotted the landing zones. It was a scene of complete destruction. His radio crackled. "Major Taijin, this is command. Congratulations on a successful operation. Prepare your teams for immediate redeployment." "What's the mission?" Taijin asked. "You're going to the Quinn homeworld. It's time to show them that nowhere is safe." Taijin smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey. "Understood. We'll be ready." The war was escalating, and humanity was just getting started. The War Council of the Galactic Coalition met in a secured chamber deep within the Wrath capital ship. Emperor Thrawn sat at the head of the table, his scaled face showing the strain of 3 years of warfare. Around him sat representatives from 5 allied species, all of them looking equally troubled. On the view screens behind them, damage reports scrolled endlessly. 12 bases destroyed. Supply lines disrupted. Coordination networks compromised. "We must strike at the source," the Quinn ambassador said, his compound eyes glittering in the dim light. "These special human soldiers must train somewhere. They must have a command structure. If we eliminate their leadership and destroy their training facilities, we cripple their entire special operations capability." A Wrath general nodded agreement. "Our intelligence indicates that the primary Special Operations Command is located on Earth itself, in the mountainous regions of their eastern continent. We have captured some of their stealth technology. We can penetrate their defenses." Emperor Thrawn considered this. It was risky. Earth was heavily defended, and every previous attempt to reach the planet had failed. But the alternative was watching their military forces bleed slowly from 1,000 invisible cuts. What assets would you need? Our best. The Shadow Fangs, 200 warriors who have trained for 20 years. Give us the captured stealth technology and authorization to strike, and we will decapitate their special forces. The Quinn will contribute Death Swarm units, the ambassador added. Our most elite soldiers, enhanced with the best genetics we can produce. Together with the Shadow Fangs, victory is certain. Emperor Thrawn looked around the table. Every face showed agreement. This was their best option. Perhaps their only option. "Authorized," he said. "Bring me the heads of their commanders." 2 weeks later, a strike force of 200 alien commandos approached Earth using stolen stealth technology. They had studied human defensive patterns for months. They knew the patrol routes. They knew the sensor frequencies. They knew where the gaps were. The journey through human-controlled space took 6 days. Moving slowly to avoid detection, they landed in the mountains of eastern Earth under cover of darkness. Snow covered the peaks. Temperature was -20 degrees. Perfect conditions for infiltration. The commandos wore advanced environmental suits and carried weapons designed to kill humans efficiently. They were the best soldiers the Galactic Coalition had ever produced. Commander Vexter led the Shadow, Fangs. He had killed in 12 wars across 30 worlds. His combat experience spanned 40 years. He had never failed a mission. Behind him, his warriors moved with practiced silence through the snow. 2 kilometers ahead, their target waited. The Special Operations Command Center, built into the mountain itself. Intelligence said the facility housed the human Special Forces leadership and training programs. Destroying it would set back the human war effort by years. Maybe long enough for the Coalition to win the war. Vexter didn't know that every step they took was being monitored. He didn't know that Brigadier General Ji-hoon had been expecting this attack for 3 months. He didn't know that he wasn't the hunter. He was the prey dot in the command center. Ji-hoon watched displays showing the alien commando positions. His operations officers tracked every movement, every heat signature, every energy reading. How many? He asked. 200 confirmed. Mix of Wrath Shadow Fangs and Queen Death Swarm units. They're using our own stealth technology against us. Ji-hoon smiled coldly. Of course they are. We made sure they captured it. Have our teams confirmed positions? Yes, sir. 300 operators deployed in the surrounding mountains. The aliens are walking into a kill box and don't know it. Good. Let them get closer. I want them confident. I want them thinking they've succeeded in their infiltration. Then we spring the trap. Captain Sujin lay in the snow 500 meters from the alien advance team. Her suit matched the color and texture of the snow perfectly, making her invisible. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate to reduce thermal signature. Through her scope, she watched a Wrath Shadow Fang move past her position. The alien was good. Very good. But not good enough. She had been lying in this position for 6 hours. The cold didn't bother her. Her suit maintained body temperature automatically, and the combat drugs in her system suppressed discomfort. She could stay here for days if needed. That was the difference between good soldiers and special forces. Regular soldiers endured hardship. Special forces became one with it. Her radio crackled softly. All units, stand by. Let them reach the primary kill zone. Sujin watched the aliens advance. They thought they were undetected. They moved with confidence, born of training and experience. She almost felt bad for them. Almost. Vexter raised his hand to halt his team. Something felt wrong. The approach had been too easy. No patrols. No sensors. No resistance. Either the humans were incredibly lax in their security, or this was a trap. He was still considering this when the mountain exploded around him. Lieutenant Jung-ho triggered the first trap. Shaped charges buried in the snow detonated, sending shrapnel through the alien formation. 20 commandos died in the first 3 seconds. The survivors tried to take cover, but there was nowhere to hide. The trap had been perfectly designed. Then the sonic weapons activated. Jung-ho had developed them specifically for this moment. They emitted frequencies calibrated to the Quin's sensory organs. To humans, the sound was merely uncomfortable. To the Quin, it was agony. Warriors clutched their heads and fell to the ground. Their enhanced hearing turned into crippling weakness. Captain Sujin opened fire. Her first shot struck a Wrath commander in the throat. Her second hit another in the eye. She fired 8 times in 12 seconds, and 8 aliens fell dead. Around her, dozens of other snipers opened fire from concealed positions. The aliens tried to return fire, but couldn't identify targets. The humans were invisible, shooting from everywhere and nowhere. Vexter realized with horrible clarity that they had been allowed to approach. The humans had known they were coming. This entire operation was a counter-trap. He tried to rally his warriors, but the sonic weapons made communication impossible. He tried to organize a fighting retreat, but the humans had positions on all sides. There was no retreat. A figure emerged from the snow directly in front of him. One moment there was nothing. The next moment, a human stood there, weapon raised. The human suit had made him completely invisible until he chose to reveal himself. "Surrender," the human said in perfect Vrath language. Vexter charged instead, pulling his blade. He was a warrior of 40 years. He would not surrender to prey. The human moved faster than should be possible, stepping aside from the blade strike and countering with movements that seemed to defy physics. Vexter realized too late that this human was enhanced. Cybernetics, gene therapy, combat drugs, all the advantages that took Vexter 40 years to develop through training. This human had been given through technology. The fight lasted 4 seconds. Vexter found himself on the ground, disarmed, with a human blade at his throat. "I said surrender," the human repeated. Around them, the battle ended. Of 200 alien commandos, 40 had surrendered. The rest were dead. The snow was stained with blood of 3 different colors. The entire engagement had lasted less than 10 minutes. Ji-hoon emerged from the command center and walked among the captured aliens. They stared at him with expressions of shock and disbelief. These were the elite of the Galactic Coalition, warriors who had trained for decades, soldiers who had won countless battles, and they had been destroyed by humans they never saw coming. "Take them to interrogation," Ji-hoon ordered. "I want everything they know about Coalition military capabilities, command structures, and strategic planning. Use whatever methods necessary." The prisoners were led away. Ji-hoon stood in the snow and looked at the mountains around him. 300 of his operators were out there, invisible and waiting. Earth was defended not by walls or shields, but by soldiers who turned the planet itself into a weapon. Soldiers who knew every rock, every tree, every hiding place. Soldiers who had trained in conditions that would kill most alien species. This was humanity's homeworld. This was where the predators lived. In the interrogation rooms, deep beneath the mountain, Coalition commandos began talking. Some resisted at first, but human. Interrogation techniques were sophisticated. Within hours, intelligence officers had detailed information about enemy fleet positions, supply routes, command codes, and strategic priorities. Information that would change the course of the war. Captain Sujin sat in the cafeteria, eating a hot meal. Around her, other operators discussed the engagement. Everyone was calm and professional. This had been a successful operation, but it wasn't remarkable. It was what they trained for, what they expected. A young operator approached her table. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." Those aliens were supposed to be the best. Elite soldiers with decades of experience. How were they so easy to defeat? Sujin considered the question. They were good soldiers. Excellent, even. But they trained to fight wars, the way their species have always fought wars. They learned tactics and strategy and combat techniques that worked on dozens of worlds against dozens of enemies. But they never trained on Earth. They never learned to fight in our environment, by our rules. What makes us different? We train harder than any military in the galaxy. We fight in deserts at 50 degrees. We fight in Arctic zones at -40. We fight in jungles and mountains and underwater and in vacuum. We train until the impossible becomes routine. And we enhance ourselves with technology that most species consider too dangerous. We turn ourselves into weapons. Is that enough? Sujin smiled. It was tonight. Tomorrow, we'll find out. Because tomorrow, we're taking the fight to them. We're going to their homeworlds. And we're going to show them what happens when you bring war to humanity. On the Coalition capital ship, Emperor Thran received the news of the failed mission with mounting horror. 200 of his best soldiers destroyed. No survivors made it back. The strike force had sent one final transmission before communications went dark. It's a trap. They were waiting for us. They knew everything. How had the humans known? How had they prepared so perfectly? The answer was becoming clear. Humanity's special forces weren't just good soldiers. They were something the galaxy had never encountered before. Warriors who combined advanced training with enhancement technology, who thought creatively instead of following doctrine, who adapted faster than any enemy could counter. The coalition was facing an enemy that didn't fight fair, didn't follow the rules, and didn't care about the way wars were supposed to be fought. An enemy that turned every advantage against its opponents and found weaknesses that shouldn't exist. Thran looked at his advisors. What do we do now? No one had an answer. For the first time in the war, the coalition leadership realized they might lose. Not because humanity had more ships or better weapons, but because humanity had soldiers who were simply better at war than anyone else in the galaxy. And those soldiers were coming for them. Colonel Miang stood in front of a holographic display showing two worlds. On the left, the Vrath Ho world, capital of an empire that controlled 300 star systems. On the right, the primary Quinn Hive world, birthplace of a species that numbered in the billions. Both worlds were deep inside enemy territory. Both were protected by planetary shields and defense fleets that had never been breached. She was planning to breach them tonight. Around her, 50 operators waited in silence. These were the best of the best, selected from thousands of candidates. Each one had completed missions that officially never happened. Each one had killed dozens of enemies. Each one had proven they could do the impossible. Intelligence from the captured coalition commandos has given us a gift, Miang said. We know the rotation schedules of their defense fleets. We know the frequencies of their shield generators. We know the location of their leadership. Most importantly, we know they don't believe we would dare attack their homeworlds. They think they're safe. She pressed a button. The display changed to show two mission profiles. Sergeant Haiyan Wu's team will hit the Vrath capital. Major Taijin's team will hit the Quinn Hive world. The objectives are not destruction. The objectives are demonstration and psychological warfare. We need to show them that nowhere is safe, that we can reach anywhere, that we choose restraint, not because we lack capability, but because we prefer peace. Hyun-Woo listened carefully. This mission was more complex than anything he had attempted before. The Vrath capital was defended by 50 warships and a planetary shield that could withstand sustained bombardment from a fleet. Getting through would require technology that barely existed and skills that few possessed. Insertion method? He asked. Experimental wormhole generator. It will put you inside their shield, in the mountains outside the capital city. From there, you're on foot. 3 days to reach the target. 3 days to complete the mission. 3 days to extraction. The wormhole technology is unstable. We can't guarantee retrieval if you miss the extraction window. Understood. What's the target? The Imperial Palace. During their victory celebration tomorrow night, you will infiltrate the ceremony and broadcast a message directly to their leadership and population. Then you will extract without killing anyone, unless absolutely necessary. We want them alive and terrified, not dead and martyred. Hyun-Woo nodded slowly. A direct infiltration of the enemy capital during a massive public event, surrounded by thousands of guards and security systems. Broadcast a message to billions of watching aliens. Then escape before they could react. It was insane. Which meant it was exactly the kind of mission special forces existed to perform. My team will need 3 days to prepare, he said. You have one. We launch tomorrow night, synchronized with the celebration. The timing is critical. 24 hours later, Hyun-woo and his team stood in a secure facility on Earth, watching technicians prepare the wormhole generator. It looked like a massive ring of metal and circuitry, crackling with energy. Through the center, space itself twisted and bent. "This is completely experimental," a technician explained nervously. "We've tested it 3 times. It worked twice. The third time, the target probe was destroyed by spatial distortion. What are odds?" Ji-won asked, honestly. 60% chance of successful transit. If you make it through, the extraction wormhole will have similar odds. Son-ho laughed. "So basically, we have a 1 in 3 chance of being torn apart by physics." "I've had worse odds." They equipped themselves with gear that represented the cutting edge of human technology. Adaptive camouflage suits that could mimic any surface. Weapons that fired silent projectiles at hypersonic speeds. Communications equipment that could hack any system. Medical injectors filled with combat drugs that would keep them functioning even with severe injuries. Checked her equipment 3 times. This mission felt different. More dangerous. Not because the enemy was stronger, but because the stakes were higher. If they failed, the war might continue for years. If they succeeded, they might end it tonight. "Ready?" Hyun-woo asked. Everyone nodded. They formed up in front of the wormhole generator. The technicians activated it. The ring hummed with power. Space twisted. Reality bent. They stepped through. For a fraction of a second, Hyun-woo existed in a place that wasn't a place. He saw colors that didn't exist. He felt sensations that had no name. Then reality snapped back, and he was standing on alien soil under alien stars. The Vrath homeworld. They had traveled 50 light years in 1 step. "Status check," he said quietly. One by one, his team confirmed they had survived the transit. All equipment functional. No injuries. They were in mountains overlooking a city of lights that stretched to the horizon. The Vrath capital, home to 20 million aliens who had no idea that 6 humans had just appeared in their midst. For 3 days, they moved through Vrath territory like ghosts. They observed patrol patterns and learned the rhythms of alien society. Dong-yoon hacked into their planetary network and downloaded cultural information, social protocols, and security procedures. Nari scouted the Imperial Palace, mapping its layout and identifying vulnerabilities. The Vrath were celebrating 3 years of war. They believed they were winning. Every news broadcast showed glorious victories. Every speech praised the inevitable defeat of humanity. They had no idea that their military was being systematically dismantled by forces they couldn't see. On the night of the victory celebration, the Imperial Palace filled with thousands of Vrath citizens and military officials. Emperor Thran himself would give a speech, broadcast across the empire to billions of viewers. It was meant to be a moment of triumph, but it became something very different. Hyun-woo's team split up, each member taking a position around the palace. Ji-won found a vantage point 2 kilometers away, setting up her rifle in case emergency support was needed. Sun-ho placed devices throughout the palace's security network that would disable alarms and surveillance at the right moment. Yoonji established a hidden medical station in case of injuries. Dong-yoon and Nari accompanied Hyun-woo to the palace itself. They walked through the front entrance, past guards and sensors, completely invisible. Their suits didn't just bend light. They absorbed sound, masked heat, and even projected false signals that made sensors report nothing unusual. Inside the palace, 10,000 Vrath gathered in a massive hall. Emperor Thrawn stood on a stage, giving his speech. Behind him, holographic displays showed maps of conquered human worlds. The crowd cheered as he promised final victory within the year. Hyun-woo, Dong-yoon, and Nari stood in the crowd, surrounded by aliens who had no idea humans were among them. Dong-Yoon worked quickly, interfacing his equipment with the palace's broadcasting system. It took him 90 seconds to take complete control. Ready? He whispered. Hyen Wu activated his communication device. 50 light years away, on Earth, Colonel Myong received the signal. She transmitted the prepared message. Suddenly, every screen in the palace changed. Emperor Thrawn's speech was replaced by the image of a human woman in military uniform. The crowd gasped. Guards reached for weapons. But before anyone could act, Myong spoke. Her voice was calm and clear, translated into perfect Vrath language. People of the Vrath Empire, I am Colonel Myong of Earth's Special Operations Command. Right now, my soldiers are in your capital, in your palace, standing among you. Your security has been completely compromised. Your shields did not stop us. Your defenses did not detect us. We are showing you this because we want you to understand a simple truth. The camera angle changed, showing detailed maps of Vrath military installations, secret bases, hidden fleet positions, classified weapon facilities, information that should have been impossible for humans to obtain. We know everything about your military. We can go anywhere in your empire. We have defeated your best soldiers. Tonight, we could have killed your leaders. We chose not to. Do you understand what this means? Hyen Wu watched the crowd's reaction. Fear spread like a wave. Vrath citizens looked at each other suspiciously, wondering if humans were standing right next to them. Guards searched desperately, but found nothing. Myong continued. For 3 years, you have fought humanity's regular forces. You learned their tactics and adapted your strategies. You thought you understood how humans fight. But our regular forces were never meant to defeat you. They were meant to defend our worlds while we prepared our real military response. What you've faced in recent months, the attacks you can't predict or prevent, the losses you can't explain, that is humanity's true military capability. And we have barely begun. The screens changed again, showing footage of destroyed Vrath bases, ambushed convoys, and eliminated command posts. Evidence of dozens of successful special operations that the Vrath government had tried to keep secret. We can continue this war. We can strike your worlds, destroy your fleets, and kill your soldiers until you have nothing left. Or we can choose peace. You invaded our space. You attacked our colonies. You killed our people. And we have proven we can destroy you if we wish. But we don't wish for destruction. We wish for you to leave our territory and never return. The final image showed Emperor Thrawn himself, standing on the stage at this very moment, frozen in shock. Your leaders are alive because we chose mercy. Your capital stands because we chose restraint. Your empire survives because we prefer peace to genocide. But understand this clearly. If you force us to continue fighting, we will show you what humanity is capable of when we stop holding back. And you will learn that the soldiers you've been fighting were never the ones you needed to fear. The broadcast ended. Every screen in the palace went dark. Then, on the central display behind Emperor Thrawn, 3 words appeared in glowing letters. We were here. Move, Hyen Wu said. They walked toward the exit, still invisible. Guards ran in all directions, searching for intruders they would never find. Sensors swept the palace, but detected nothing. The Vrath security forces were looking for an army, for a strike team, for anything that matched their understanding of warfare. They never considered that 3 humans could walk out through the front door. Past hundreds of guards, completely undetected. The team regrouped in the mountains. The extraction wormhole opened on schedule, a tier in space that led home. They stepped through and emerged in the facility on Earth. The technicians cheered. Against all odds, the mission had succeeded perfectly. At the same moment, on the Quinn Primary Hive world, Major Taijin's team completed their parallel mission. The hive mind received the same message, demonstrated with the same effectiveness. Humanity could reach anywhere, could do anything, and chose restraint only because it preferred peace. Within 48 hours, the Galactic Coalition requested emergency peace negotiations. The message was clear. They were withdrawing from all contested systems. They were establishing a demilitarized zone. They would never again threaten human space. The official statement cited strategic reassessment and resource allocation priorities. But every species in the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity had soldiers who could go anywhere, defeat anyone, and accomplish impossible missions. Soldiers who moved like phantoms and struck like lightning. Soldiers who fought by no rules except victory. The whispers spread across 1,000 worlds. Stories of human special forces became legend. Some species didn't believe the stories. They thought they were propaganda or exaggeration. Those species were wise enough not to test the hypothesis. 6 months after the war ended, Sergeant Hyunwoo stood in a military cemetery on Earth, looking at the graves of regular soldiers who had died in the war. These were the men and women who had held the line for 3 years, who had fought and died while Special Forces trained and prepared, who had never known the full scope of humanity's plans, but had trusted and served anyway. "They're the real heroes," Jiwon said, standing beside him. "We just finished what they started." Hyunwoo nodded. "They showed the galaxy that humans don't surrender. We showed the galaxy what happens when you push humans too far. Together, we ended a war." Around them, monuments listed the names of the fallen. Thousands of names. Thousands of soldiers who would never know that their sacrifice had bought time for something greater, that their stubborn defense had made the enemy confident and careless, that their deaths had meaning. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity's regular forces were formidable, but humanity's special forces were something else entirely. They were the nightmare that lived in the dark, the blade that struck from nowhere, the proof that some species should never be pushed to show their full capabilities. Peace settled over human space. Trade resumed. Diplomatic relations normalized. The galaxy moved on, but it never forgot. In military academies across 1,000 worlds, the war with humanity became a case study. The lesson was simple and clear. Never underestimate humans. And never, ever force them to deploy their special forces. Because by the time you realize what they're capable of, it's already too late. Sergeant Hyunwoo and his team returned to their training, preparing for missions that would hopefully never come. They were ready if needed. Ready to go anywhere, do anything, defeat anyone. Ready to protect humanity from any threat. The galaxy feared humanity's regular soldiers. Then they met the special forces. And they learned that some species are predators, not because they're cruel, but because evolution made them very, very good at survival. Humanity had climbed from the bottom of Earth's food chain to the top through persistence, adaptability, and the willingness to do whatever it took to survive. The aliens had awakened something ancient in humanity. The instinct to defend, the will to fight, the capability to win against any odds. They had seen humanity's soldiers and thought they understood war. They were wrong, and now they would never make that mistake again.